This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast. And one of the most privileged positions I can find myself in as a host, nearly towards the end of season 5 of the Recruiters Recruitment podcast, is when a guest comes on who's actually never done a broadcast before. And that's the position I find myself in with this week's guest, who, when we've been speaking before I press record, is absolutely delightful. And I think you're going to love this conversation. You've probably clicked on this link because you're either it really resonates with you, or as a leader, you want to ensure that you're truly being inclusive. So please welcome today Ellie Kay, who is the founder of The Key to ADHD. Welcome to you today, Ellie.
Hi, Lysha. How are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Big
Thank
changes, but all good.
Big changes. I cannot wait to delve into today's subject. I really can't, because I think it's something that's very prominent right now, not just in the recruitment industry, but across society generally. But I know that you've got a prolific recruitment career spanning a quarter of a century, and you've made this recent transition. So just give us a potted history as to how you've ended up launching the Key to ADHD.
Yeah, well, basically, I started out in recruitment straight from uni, trades and labour. Started my own business when I was 27,
Wow.
in trades and labour, and then kind of went somewhere else, learned sort of permanent recruitment, went back, and sorry, that was before it. And then I started a final builders clean business, so it was all in construction. Turned over like 1.8 million in my trades and labour, about 500 grand in my as a subcontractor in
Wow.
construction. Then I found 2008 recession hit us really badly. Did a few bits and bats, did a bit of training then actually for people who've been made redundant. So that's sort of where I got a bit of a flavour for that. And then decided to become a rec to rec. I would put myself out there, a rec to rec, put me on a few interviews, and then I thought, which obviously we do as rec to recs, I thought I'll do this myself and sort of self-taught myself the rec to rec market, which I was in for 10 years.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years ago, pivoted back to construction, did that permanent in America and the UK, and then found myself in this position where once again pivoting, but completely out of recruitment this time into something that I feel is big in recruitment. It's big in industry, in you know, like in
Mm.
general, but in recruitment, I think it's quite a big subject.
It
So
is.
I'm a ADHD coach, just got accredited last month.
Amazing. Congratulations with that. And I think that's a really funny, flippant comment about the rec to rec, because the rec to rec space is probably the most notorious for people just thinking, oh, being as a candidate, which is what happened to me. I was a candidate and thought I can do a better job here.
Yeah. I
And,
think people try it and fail, but obviously we made a success of it.
yeah.
And I loved it. I loved it for years, but my heart always lay in construction in a way.
Mm.
So that's why I went back to that. But I think I just found myself on my own again with people leaving, setting up on their own. No bad feeling, but just really struggled then to, I've been in it 25 years to kind of do the bits that in my head, with this interest-based nervous system
Yeah.
that I have with an ADHD, struggled to enjoy doing when it came to working on my own.
So thank you very much for that. And I think, there'll be a lot of people listening that will really respect you for sharing in a very succinct way, I have to say, your journey through recruitment, through the recession, the construction market, into rec. They're not easy markets. When do from a personal perspective, when did you get your diagnosis with ADHD?
I got it when I was 45, so that's 3 years ago.
Oh, so
Yeah,
what made you
so
realise, like, what, because
well, if I'm absolutely honest, me and Chris, who worked for me 7 years, did joke a little bit sometimes about how I had traits of ADHD, and like I kept, when I forgot stuff, did stuff on the wrong date and things like that. So I was a bit flippant about it myself, if I'm honest. I didn't want the understanding. And then I went on holiday and read Leanne Maskell's A to Z book, which I was like, oh my gosh, like literally every one of these alphabets is me. And I messaged Leanne herself, and she came back to me with a few things about the coaching then. So that was like a seed in my brain right back then. And then I carried on. We went into construction, which sort of whet my appetite for quite a while. Really enjoyed that. But yeah, I think getting the diagnosis just made me feel better about myself, made me feel better about muck ups I've made in life, massive life changing decisions, good and bad. Some you regret, some you don't. But sort of like Alex Partridge on his podcast always saying is
Yeah.
that it all makes sense, and it's like, oh, that's why I did that. That's why I decided to do that, and it was a massive, massive turning point for me in
Yeah.
feeling kinder to myself, really, I
Oh, I
suppose.
love, oh, that's made me go all goosebumpy, Ellie, because I think that we if I'm sort of flipping it on the other side, that so many people seem to think there's a fixation around labels, but with an elder daughter who is also on the spectrum, and my stepson is on the spectrum, he's autistic, I think very often it is that kindness to yourself to understand who you are
That's
and the
it.
reason that you make the decisions, and it's like it cements in your own mind that this is who I actually am, and it's about then understanding in order to progress forward, it's not having a big question mark around the decisions that you've made and not sort of second guessing yourself. So I love that. I think that will really hit with a lot of
Yeah.
people. So I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, and I think you'd have to probably have your head in the sand to not understand what a neurodiverse person actually is. But can we just, to simplify for anyone who's listening, what exactly is that spectrum? And then for you, where does ADHD sit on that?
Okay, so there's lots of different labels, if you like, in that spectrum, but it is, I don't like labels in some ways, but in some ways it helps us understand where that person is. So ADHD, autism, then there's dyspraxia, dyscalculia, there's dyslexia, there's quite a few different things, and sometimes they can be overlapping as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes, if not sort of nurtured, can lead to mental health problems, but they're not mental health conditions. They're just a difference in
Yeah.
brain, really. So everyone's neurodiverse. We've all got different brains, but neurodivergent is when it's different to the mainstream, like society. So
Yeah.
ADHD comes up a lot in recruitment. It's probably the main one. That's where it is with me.
Mm.
So ADHD has three different types. So there's your hyperactive, which is the rarest. There's the attention deficit or difference, as I like to call it,
Yeah.
where you
Love it.
select out your where you put your attention. And then there's combined type, which is where I fall in, where I've got both basically.
Mm.
So you can have moderate to severe. I was quite severe on mine. I was quite high up.
On the hyper side. So, I mean, look, if someone's listening now, and we said this off camera, didn't we? That if this episode doesn't appeal to the masses, but it impacts one person listening, then we've done our job. Me as the
Yeah,
host,
yeah.
you as the guest. When you look back now, pre-diagnosis,
Mm,
what were the behaviors that you believe you demonstrated that were not, inverted commas, typical of
mm.
maybe a recruiter or a business person or business professional that now you understand was your ADHD?
Yeah. Well, risk taking, which is, great in a lot of areas because it means you set up your own business. I've
Yeah.
flipped business quite a lot of different times. I've pivoted, so I'm willing to take the risks, being impulsive, but it can impact your personal life in making risky decisions, doing things impulsively, business life as well, if you're making snap decisions, I guess. But forgetting stuff like, maybe typing an email wrong quite a lot of times. I'm not talking about small times, losing your phone all day. I'm not talking about once a week or a couple of times a week or getting on the park and ride to work and realizing you've left your laptop in the car, and it's just beating yourself up for these mistakes
Right.
all the time, constantly. Like, why have I done that? Why have I done that? Taking your child to school, forgetting the lunchbox, the bottle, whatever it is,
Right.
and massive things like booking flights on the wrong day. Like I booked
Oh,
booking like theatre tickets, sat in separate places all the wrong day, and
oh,
all sorts of sort of things that other people would look at. They'd spend attention to detail, making sure that those things were correct. And I feel I did, but I didn't.
but
I
you did.
felt in my mind I was doing that, but I wasn't doing that. And then I had to do stuff like when I was ringing somebody in the night, I'd have to put it in my husband's diary because otherwise I would forget. Or sometimes I'd put it in a diary that was like a month away. So it's just coming up with ways. I still consider myself as being a successful person in life and work because I came up with different hacks, and that's kind of why I'm coaching people to try and do the same, really, and
I
to try
love I love
and
that.
manage their life
It's
healthier.
coping mechanisms for anything that makes you feel, I'm going to use this word very, very generically, but that anxiety that it was
Yeah,
creating you clearly,
yeah.
because I'm an empath and I could literally feel all your anxiety
Mm,
of all the
mm.
things. all the examples that you said there, which even on their own, in their own entity, would make anyone feel quite stressed. But if that's happening all the time, and you've now created coping strategies, which is clearly why you're an incredible coach with it. So, I mean, this is a bit of a controversial question, Ellie, but having been in the industry yourself for 25 years, how supportive and truly inclusive do you think our industry is to people who have got ADHD?
Well, I think that they're hiring a lot of them without realizing, to be fair.
Okay.
I would say if I was to hazard a guess, most recruitment businesses will have at least one or two, if not
Right.
more, and sometimes at leader level.
Yeah.
Sometimes these people are the people who've started the business in the first place because
Yeah.
there's so much entrepreneurialism that comes with ADHD, like I say, risk taking and fairness and justness. That's a massive part of it, and empathy to people who work for you.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I don't think that, I mean, in all the years I did rec tech and construction, I'd never had a client say, oh, we're open to, people who are neurodivergent, or
Mm.
if somebody had an issue with something, I just don't think that they would dare sort of say, I'm ADHD or I'm autistic or whatever. I just don't think it's very welcoming or warm to people's
Yeah.
differences. And I do feel like even I'm to blame for when I hired people like me. So I
Yeah.
think you've said it before, I've heard on your podcast before that we're obsessed by hiring this culture that is going out drinking, playing football, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
really, your office would be so much better if you had lots of different brains. So yeah, ADHDers might suit it well because they lack dopamine. So they get the dopamine from placing a candidate, winning
Absolutely.
a job, making commission.
Yeah.
But then they struggle sometimes, speaking from
Yeah.
experience, with the making of lists, the research elements, and things like that, where someone who's autistic might
I
shine.
was I was just about to say I've done Rec to Rec now for 23 years, and I've only ever once
Mm.
known a company positively discriminate, which is,
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah,
a bias point of view, positively discriminated, specifying that this role will suit somebody who is autistic. And it was for, I won't name the names, it was
mm.
for a search firm, and they wanted somebody to come and work within their data and research team.
Yeah,
And actually, I happened to have a recruiter
yeah,
who hadn't, had a label but was autistic. We had a conversation, and actually he went on to become exceptional, and he ended up heading up the whole division in the end. But I think, we have to be the educators, you as a coach to people from
yeah,
an agnostic point of view, and me as a rec to rec, that, and I'm very mindful with our amazing partner, Diversity and Recruitment, through the training I'm going through at the moment with Joe Major, that we have to ensure that the language that we use when we're talking about people within our business and ourselves
yeah.
has to be, reflective of the attributes that we are seeking to add. And
Mm.
that, I think we're in a very different world now to the one that you described there, where it's like, I guess the drinking culture and the kind of whole
Yeah,
thing. It's just, when you look at it now, it is actually ludicrous that that's kind
yeah.
of been fixated. Now, I would like to think that as a partner to our industry, we have moved well away from that now. There are still companies that do that, and that's
It's better. I agree with you on that. And I think the mental health is such a massive thing. But what I'm saying is that if you were more open to people coming to them and saying, look, I think I might have autism, I think I might have
yeah,
ADHD, and then say, right, how can we help you as a business do better? Right, you're struggling with this area. Let's let you have this person to help, or body double or whatever, or you're struggling in this loud environment. Let's have a quiet space for you or whatever.
absolutely.
If we did all these things, then people would be more productive for a start off. You'd have a happier office, you know what I mean? And it would be just better. So I think the mental health issues like depression, anxiety come because those things aren't being ticked off.
I'm being ticked off.
How,
And actually, I am not an expert in AI, but I've spoken about it on numerous episodes now. And obviously, as a business, we are incorporating it into the tasks that we don't necessarily have an influence over, the admin roles, etc. But I think if I was listening to this episode now with somebody that was either pre-diagnosis or post-diagnosis of ADHD, this is where AI could really enhance somebody that, maybe doesn't enjoy the organizational side of running a recruitment desk, but is brilliant getting out and about. But when it comes to arranging interviews, that's where AI will be your best friend.
Yeah, it can help with ChatGTP and stuff, but I think it's still, you want to be authentic with these headhunts and stuff. That's the only thing I've felt sometimes with ChatGTP, but it's kind of, yeah, organizing you better and having somebody
Yeah.
who you can help alongside you, just check off things now and again, and looking at who's right for the right, right role, putting people in the right positions and checking in with them as well. There's
Yeah.
lots of things that you can do to be supportive and get a better workforce with lots of different ideas and innovation, because you've got so many different brains. If we all hire the same type of person, it's not going to be
No.
a great sort of business. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I
progressive.
wonder I wonder if we were to do an analysis on ChatGPT even, which we should have done before we started recording, on out of the UK market in particular, because that's where we both work at the moment. On I realise that we have global listeners. What percentage of the people working in this industry have been actually identified as being neurodiverse, and out of those, what percentage of those people consider themselves to be ADHD? And then a further piece of data would be, out of those, how many of those are founders or leaders? Because
Yeah.
I would agree with you, but we can't make a straw poll on it. So, from an impact perspective, when you look at yourself, if you were working as an employee in a recruitment business, what are the key things that your business could do for you to retain you and to keep you satisfied, supported, and, basically looked after? What could they do to ensure that their working environment is ADHD friendly, but also from a cultural perspective?
Yeah, well, I think first off, it's having a neurodiversity policy in place so
Exactly.
people know exactly what to do and how it would go about, and be encouraging that people can come forward and they will be fully supported. I think that's kind of the first place to start. Interviewing and hiring. I mean, this is very controversial, but I've come across this recently with Leanne, who trains me, in that giving interview questions beforehand, and as like get a bit of a guide for that person, would it, otherwise, if you're just putting them on the spot, which I know recruitment industry likes to do to see if they can react quickly, the problem is it's almost like exam conditions, because you're having to revise, when think of a time when I did this, think of a time when I
Right. Okay.
try and remember it. And ADHDs are not great with some memory things, so that you might miss
Okay.
out on a really good person because they can't quite remember a time when they demonstrated this, that, or the other. Whereas if they had the interview questions in advance, they would have that
That's
sealed off.
brilliant. Can we just
Yeah,
pause there a second?
can't imagine that happening, but
Well, yeah, but why not,
yeah.
actually? Why not?
Mm.
Because you're not going to catch somebody out. And if we are talking specifically about recruiters here, asking a competency-based question and bearing that in mind, you are going to get a much better answer. I think the reason that, on the flip side, why leaders throw people on the spot is because recruitment, there's so many different
Fast-paced, yeah,
variables.
yeah.
You can't always factor in the consequences, but for the purpose of employing that recruiter,
Mm.
then you can, actually. And I think
I think
I've never even
certain set
thought about.
questions would be good. I think certain set questions, and then maybe a few. But I mean, especially if you're autistic, there's a lot of anxiety over what is coming
Right.
up. I've got close family members who are autistic. What's coming up in this, and then you might lose out on a great person because they just felt so
Yeah,
anxious that they
right.
couldn't answer it properly.
The podcast has been worth it just for
Um,
that one thing. So what else
yeah.
could they do to
Well,
impact?
I think training on it and coaching potentially. So that's where I come in, which
Yeah.
is basically going in and explaining to the leaders and the managers how it shows up, how they can't go and say to someone, I think you're ADHD, this is why.
No.
But they can recognize it in the staff and think
Yeah.
this person's struggling in this area. They might be ADHD, but if I help them with this, that, and the other, then I get more out of them.
Yeah.
And then potentially, I mean, when I had my business, I put people through counselling, CBT, if they felt they were in a bad place, because that's investing in your
Yeah.
workforce, making them happier. It can sometimes show up in struggles in the personal life.
Yeah.
ADHD is, people have
Mm.
been trying, so have been coaching some recruiters already, and it's sometimes chaotic in their, like home life, organization, tidiness and stuff, and that impacts on the work as well.
Yes.
So having that sort of coaching piece, and maybe even delivering training to the whole group so that they can all recognize, oh, that really rings true with me. I think that I could have some traits and potentially am. Don't have to be diagnosed to be coached or trained. It's
Yeah.
just recognizing your skills and the areas you struggle and try and come up with some mechanisms to overcome those struggles and really excel in the areas that you're great, because there's lots of areas.
I was just about, that was exactly what I was, the point I was going to kind of tag on to the end of what you've just said, which was brilliant, Ellie. That for me, when we are such a difficult industry to recruit for, hence there are so many rec to recs, we are notoriously difficult to recruit for ourselves, which is ironic.
Mm.
But when you have somebody in your business, or you are attracting somebody into your business that is neurodiverse, ADHD or otherwise, then look at the strengths, do an analysis. What part of the business can they really excel in,
Mm.
as opposed to putting them doing something that, you wouldn't put somebody like yourself, like managing the database or
Definitely
putting
not.
CVs on the system or reformatting CVs, but you coming up with, ideas of content, or,
Mm.
getting out to seeing a client and winning the client over. I
Yeah.
mean, let her off a lead, that's where
I
I
think
think,
there's so many people that, not even just in recruitment, but who are in the wrong positions, that are pigeonholed into certain positions, whereas we should say, look, where's the skill set here? This person's got this skill set, even buddying them with someone who's got a different skill set and things, because I think that's why it lends well to ADHD's recruitment, the dopamine need. That's what we're constantly going for. But we can then have burnout because we can totally hyper focus on something and
yeah,
really go hell for leather. And then it'd be like, oh God. And another thing that ADHD is have, they can't say no, like they struggle to say no. So they'll take on more and more and more. And it's recognizing that, like as a leader, it's recognizing that this person's getting overloaded
yeah,
before it becomes a problem. And
yeah.
then there's the whole thing about the law in general and the Disability Act and the fact that, you want to do things for your staff before it gets to a problem, basically.
And if I think back to 5 years ago, the whole resonance at the time was around mental health. We were probably, as we record this, just about to go into lockdown for the first time. And I think mental health was such a prominent part of everybody's agenda, both for attraction and retention, the pledge, and, really thinking around, what can we do to ensure that we're supporting people. And it got long forgotten in the post-COVID boom of 2022. It's like, well, whatever. And I think that actually, if we're to endure and to ensure that we are, keeping our industry safe from itself, everything that you've said today, it kind of, for me, it comes under the banner of the general banner of mental health and well-being. And, but that includes leaders and
Yeah.
founders. That doesn't just mean the billers and fee earners, that means the founders too. So I think this has been really, really insightful. And, I'm really grateful for you sharing, quite a personal experience with us. But clearly you're somebody who's got, you're in such a unique position, having been in, two really impactful industries.
Mm.
You've supplied to the industry as well as a rec to rec. So that's great. So the key to ADHD, and what can we expect from you in 2025?
Yeah, well, I think it's obviously when you first start out on something, it's finding your niche. So I've been coaching kids, I've been coaching people in construction, people in recruitment, people in business, marketing people. I think really it's finding out. I've kind of, the people in recruitment, I've been mentoring a bit as well. So I think anybody who's in recruitment who is struggling as a leader or who is struggling to talk to their employers, that's where I can come in and help.
Amazing.
There is sort of access to work that people can get, but it takes about 6 months. But I think it's urging companies to think about how much they know about it and how much their business could be greater by really getting the strengths out of these people that are neurodivergent and trying to help them in the areas they struggle.
I agree. What a beautiful way to finish your first ever podcast. Stick a
Oh yeah. Ooh, hopefully I did
stick a
all
pin
right.
in it. I told you it flew by. Half an hour flew by. How did it go from your perspective?
Yeah, good. No, it's good, and it's nice to finally meet you as one of my right rivals back in the day. But
Oh,
I'm glad you're doing so well, and yeah,
cheers.
it's exciting to think about the next step for me. But yeah, there's lots of different packages I'm putting together and things. So
Brilliant.
we'll,
Well, if people want to get in touch with Ellie, make sure you mention the Recruitment podcast, which is obviously what you're listening to now. Ellie, you have been absolutely delightful, and I'm so happy that you dropped me that message. I think it's been a really useful and very important podcast that I think will actually become a very popular one because it will resonate with so many people in the audience. So thank you for sharing with us today, and we hope you enjoyed it.
okay, you too. Thanks a lot.